Good evening, and welcome to this edition of Off the Bench. My name is Patrick Gustafson. We bring you terrible news on tonight's episode. That one of our greatest bits in one of Brandon's beloved props, Mac Jones, has passed away and resurrected in Jacksonville.
R.I.P. to the GOAT, Mac Jones.
We will remember Mac Jones, as well as talk about the rest of the free agency chaos right here, right now, on Off the Bench with Benchwarmer Bran. Bran,
All
take
right,
it away.
hit the music. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make that whole thing play out. Welcome back to Off the Bench, guys. So you guys may recall last week us being uncertain if we'd have free agency moves to talk about. Pardon us for our complete neglect of remembering that the legal tampering period is essentially just the start of free agency, which began yesterday. On top of that, we had moves last week that went down because there were some guys who released prior to their contracts just running out, so they were not subject to the rules of the new league year turning over, and they were just able to be signed, i.e. Russell Wilson. Pat, I could not have been more ignorant thinking that the Russell Wilson signing was going to kind of be the headline of this show, and I mean, it's still one of the one of the bigger talking points.
It says it on the bottom, but I don't know if that's one of the top three.
Yeah, it's definitely, it has some competition for sure. But yeah, free agent tampering window opened on Monday. A ton of reported deals. I mean, basically every notable free agent outside of a handful have, in principle, agreed to deals. And I mean, when they do that, the deals are done. I mean, it's not like guys go back on these just because they're not official until Wednesday. But that is when they will be made official. So look, we're going to go over every move as best as we can. This podcast, as you all know, is certainly fantasy football centric when that time of year is, upon us. So we're certainly going to be going over the fantasy implications of moves that have fantasy implications. And then
we got some defense to touch on too.
Yeah, look. If we've got the time, we will dive into the defense as well. We'll still go over the biggest defensive moves regardless, but we will go over the offensive ones first and foremost. And also, before we get into it, I want to give a shout out and a congratulations to someone who I don't even know if he listens to this pod, but my buddy Dave officially welcomed his new baby into the world on Monday. Ella has joined us, so congratulations, Dave. He told me he got 26 minutes of sleep last night, and it was not because of NFL free agency. So can't relate. We both probably got about the same amount of sleep, but for different reasons. So just wanted to mention that. But
we're old as shit, dude.
What'd you say?
We're old as shit.
Oh yeah, we're fucking dust, Pat. We are so dust. I knew that. But let's get into it. And this sound effect has never been more needed in its entire life.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
All right, so folks, I think the game.
That's the only sound effect you're going to play today. I think
it is. I think the game plan here is to go over each deal in terms of relevance, because if we try to go over it in terms of most recent, we're going to probably drive ourselves crazy, and it's going to be very confusing for you guys to follow. So, relevance, Pat. I think at the top of that list has to be Kirk Cousins going to the Atlanta Falcons.
Agreed.
This is a move that certainly we talked about and certainly I think makes the most sense for the Falcons. I did have a discussion with a friend about, he was of the opinion that they should have gone after Justin Fields, which for a few reasons I don't agree with, but it did make me think about the fact that for a team like the Falcons, who are very much, kind of trying to peak and go for a championship in this moment in time, I don't think there was a clear, definitive right answer for them at quarterback. Like, there was no perfect answer, I should say, at quarterback, but I think they certainly did the best they possibly could by going to get Kirk Cousins. At the end of the day, this is still a 35-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. It's not a sure thing that you're going to get, insane production from the guy, but this was the move that if the Falcons are going to try to, snap up a Super Bowl here somehow, or at least make the most of the core that they have, I think this was the right guy for the job. And now Kirk and his khakis are heading to H-Town? Not H-Town. A-Town, excuse me.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with the Justin Fields take. I just think that Kirk Cousins is the better fit. Just if they couldn't have swung Kirk Cousins, I think Justin Fields would have been great there. But I think Kirk just gives the Falcons such a nice floor offensively. We've seen this guy just be a very solid quarterback in Washington and Minnesota. Obviously, like you said, coming off Achilles and he's old as shit, but to have that kind of veteran presence with 3 top 10 skill position players is, without Arthur Smith, is desperately desperately what the Falcons needed. And again, I kind of said it last week as we thought this might happen. In terms of Kirk, I think he's the same. He's still a low-end QB1. It's going to be really ugly. He's going to have his big weeks, but I think this just elevates Drake London and Kyle Pitts that much more, because Bijan was going to be Bijan no matter what without Arthur Smith now, but I think he elevates those two so much, and I guess this is the best time to get Darnell Mooney out of the way. He's signed with the Falcons as well, and he is a deep ball specialist. Justin Fields could not throw the fucking deep ball to save his life. Kirk Cousins can. I saw a stat that he was actually the most accurate deep ball thrower according to one of the metrics, so...
Yeah, it's definitely a good fit for Mooney, obviously a good fit for Kirk. What I'm curious to see with this, Pat, is who kind of emerges as Kirk's favorite target. I mean, I think the betting favorite would certainly be Drake London, just because you're generally, betting on receivers over tight ends in most situations. But we've had such abysmal quarterback play in Atlanta for the past few years that I don't think we really know which player out of London or Pitts is like the more impactful receiving threat. And I think we may finally find out, or they'll just put up completely even numbers and we'll just have two hopefully fantasy viable players in that offense. But it's definitely a change from Minnesota. Look, Minnesota, Kirk had an incredibly great receiver in Justin Jefferson and a very good tight end in TJ Hawkinson, but it was not a question of who the 1A was to the 1B or the 1 to the 2 even from Jefferson to Hawkinson. I think with London and Pitts, maybe, Pat, we really get a Kyle Pitts breakout. And for those asking, and I've already had said this in the past, if the Falcons were to make a move like this, yes, I am back in on Kyle Pitts. No, I'm not taking him. No, I'm not taking him in the third fucking round, but I'm absolutely back in on him as a I will draft him somewhere potentially and see what he can do in an offense led by Kirk Cousins. I also saw that Kirk is much better playing in domes, which is what the Falcons play in, so that will be benefit AO. Get Kirk some dome, baby, and he'll be just fucking killing it. So look, half his games are going to be
Rivers out here.
Half his games are going to be in the dome in Atlanta. That is good news for him. And just an A+ like home run move for the Falcons altogether. And Pat, I think this, I have to think about it, but I think this cements Bijan as probably my fantasy RB2 behind McCaffrey. All I needed to see was an offense that's going to be afloat. And I think Kirk Cousins makes this offense more than afloat. He is very, very good as a quarterback and certainly a at least borderline top 10 player at the position. So Falcons get Kirk Cousins, and I think, have to be the favorites to win the NFC South. Certainly they're my pick to win the NFC South. But we will see how, that is a completely new cast of folks all coming together, new head coach, new kind of everything to try and mesh it all, but I'm very optimistic for it, and certainly optimistic for it from a fantasy perspective. Darnell Mooney being the one guy that he's just kind of a keep your eye on him guy, and maybe a desperation flex dude, but I could see very well all of London, Pitts, and Bijan Robinson being startable fantasy, and Kirk himself being startable fantasy assets pretty much every week. So this is certainly a great move for the Falcons. Pat, this is not the next most relevant move, but it's simply the replacement move for the Vikings. So I wanted to touch on it here. The Vikings are replacing Kirk Cousins with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was basically Sam Darnold. Hold on, wait. I think I
you got something like that?
Folks, Kirk Cousins has been replaced by Sam Darnold. Vikings fans, how do you feel? Oh, yeah, no, that's kind of how we all feel also. Okay, so Sam, we're so mature. I'm glad we have a producer who's just great at sound effects. It's me. Darnold was basically down to two teams. It was the Vikings, it was the Broncos, and ended up being the Vikings. So it doesn't seem like we're going to get a Trey Lance renaissance here. But, yeah, look, this is one of the teams that the offseason in general, Pat, I feel, sparks optimism for a lot of teams, right? Like, even if your team doesn't make any major moves to like sign a big name player, you can still have a firm reset. Maybe your team was dealing with injuries. You can look ahead toward next season and think, hey, anything can happen. It's professional sports. It's the National Football League. No one thought the fucking Texans would be good this year. No one thought a lot of things. The Vikings, though, this has to be the clearest example of just not complete pessimism. Your team going down the toilet, at least for this season. I'm not, putting a stick and a fork in the Vikings forever. It's just, this is as unfortunate and bad of a move. Like, I don't think you can defend the Sam Darnold signing if you're a Vikings fan.
No, I don't quite get it at all because, we'll talk about some of these other backup quarterbacks that have been signed. Like Jacoby Brissett, for example. Like, last time we saw him starting, we saw a reasonably productive quarterback. Like, he was able to maintain, keep that Browns offense afloat. Last time we saw Sam Darnold playing, he was getting run out of Carolina, which was arguably the worst place to be in the NFL at the time, in favor of Baker Mayfield and PJ Walker and whoever else. And obviously, we didn't see him at all in San Francisco. So, like, what changed in this entire year span that led the Vikings to believe, oh yeah, Sam Darnold can be this guy that he has yet to show he can be? He has never shown that he can be a starting quarterback. I get they're in a tough spot in terms of where they're drafting in the quarterbacks. It seems like they're going to have to trade up. They're going to have to trade up if they want one of the big four. Even J.J. McCarthy. I hate that J.J. McCarthy is now being lumped into the big four, but alas, it is true. I get they're in a tough spot, and it's just so underwhelming, but to bring him in and clearly say, like, hey, this is our guy, is like, it's like, yikes. Like, if you wanted to bring him in to compete, and then if he proves it, he proves it. But I hate it for Vikings fans because they still have Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the game. They've got TJ Hawkinson, one of the best tight ends in the game. Jordan Addison looked good at the end of last year. You bring in Aaron Jones. They have a good cast of characters, and maybe that'll lift Sam Darnold up. He didn't play with a good cast of characters in New York or Carolina. Yeah. But yeah, this is by far, out of the starting quarterback moves, this is by far my least favorite.
Yeah, and like, I understand maybe what the Vikings and, what even their more optimistic fans might be thinking, and it could be, a Gino Smith situation. But I have a couple things to say to that. One, the Gino Smith thing is, has that ever happened at all otherwise in our lifetime, Pat? A guy who's been around the league for like almost a decade of being pretty bad and being relegated to a backup, and then starts and becomes legitimately good, but then also, like, just to get off of that too, like, he's kind of fallen off. So really, what's the ceiling for a player, even if he turns out like the Geno Smith experiment did, if Sam Darnold, recaptures or captures for the first time some kind of magic in the NFL? Look, his action with the Niners really boiled down to one game against the Rams, kind of at the end of the regular season. 16 for 26, 189 yards, one touchdown, no picks. 96.5 passer rating, sure. I mean, he was
in a fine Kyle Shanahan offense, too.
Right.
Like, and Sam Darnold fits that kind of offense.
Exactly. I'll say this, like, I don't want to chastise them too bad because I don't know that they're done addressing the position. Like, I am sure they're going to draft somebody. Look, as long as they give that guy a reasonable chance to, maybe win the job in camp or in the preseason, it's fine. It's a tough spot to be in. It's like, yeah, there were other guys they could have gone after. You've got, you mentioned your Jameis Winstons, your Jacoby Brissett's. But
I'd rather have Drew Lock.
Drew Lock.
If I was the Vikings, I would have rather taken a shot at Drew Lock over Sam Darnold.
Yeah. I'm with you. I don't think this was a very smart move to make. I don't think Sam Darnold is a good quarterback. I think for some reason people are still holding on to like the prospect hype he had and just giving him all the excuses in the world of, he played for the Jets and they were terrible and the Panthers were terrible, no supporting cast. I understand all of that. I really
It's the only thread he has left.
I really get all that, but there's also an element of like any quarterback that's going to be worth their salt needs to show some flashes despite those circumstances. And I don't believe Sam Darnold really has. It's like, not as bad of a situation as you can be in the NFL. Not every single snap is the worst like run play and worst setup play of your like. There should be moments that you can find and exploit and show teams that you are a guy that has untapped potential. I don't think Darnold has that untapped potential. I think Justin Jefferson is probably about to step out in front of a bus any moment now. It's a tough scene for the Vikings. Pat, I'll ask you this since we are in the business of fantasy football. Just from a Jefferson perspective, What does this do to his value for you if Sam Darnold is the guy going into next year? Because he's still getting all the targets. I mean, yes, Addison's there, but before we were looking at a quarterback that we were confident can get him the ball on a regular basis. Like, does Justin Jefferson fall outside of like the top, I'll say, 3 wide receivers for you?
Off the top of my head, I'd say no. But
Okay.
in terms of he was going first in a lot of drafts last year. There's no way in the world I would take him over a guy like Christian McCaffrey, over a guy like Bijan Robinson. And then I guess it comes down to what, like, you got Tyreek Hill, you've got Jamar Chase, hopefully bounces back. We've got CeeDee Lamb. Mm-hmm. Those three have quarterbacks that don't scare me. I mean, Tua is scary, but he had no problem getting Tyreek the ball.
Tua is scary, but he can do what he needs to do to support
exactly. So it's like, I feel so much more confident in those three in terms of their QB situations, but Justin Jefferson is just so damn good. Yeah. He's so damn good. And, we've seen Devontae Adams at least produce somewhat with mediocre quarterback play. Maybe he can. But I feel like I might just want to play it safer with those, those 3 guys, for example. Correct me if I'm forgetting someone as well. I don't.
No, it's basically them. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown in that conversation. But no, you're not missing any big fish. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's going to affect him like too much because he is so good, but it does put him in the category of, like, me, I love to play my early picks literally as safe as possible. And he certainly takes himself out of like bulletproof safe territory if Sam Darnold or a rookie ends up being his quarterback. Now, if his quarterback ends up being Michael Penix and he's just going to fucking throw the ball downfield 1,000,000 times a game, hey, now we're talking. But if we're looking at Sam Darnold, I agree.
Looks great in purple.
He does look great in purple. So we'll see. Again, I do not think the Vikings are done here at the quarterback position, but the fact that they kind of prioritized Darnold and that Darnold, for whatever reason, was like a kind of hot commodity, at least between the Vikings and the Broncos, definitely weird vibes all around. Pat, the deal we started off the show talking about, hinting at, Russell Wilson to the Steelers. Now, we mentioned last week that this was the team that he was interested in, that it seemed like the fit based on what he was looking for, and it has happened. Russ is, in fact, going to be on that team-friendly deal, and the Broncos are just going to be paying basically all of his salary. How do you feel about this fit? Now that it is official, I still feel the same. I don't think this is like going to really move the needle much for Pittsburgh. It'll just make things maybe a little less ugly than it did under Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, see, I kind of stand by what I said, too, in that it will make it better, but not a whole lot better. There is still a pretty firm ceiling on Russell Wilson and this offense. And now, obviously, spoiler alert, they just traded Deontay Johnson within the last half hour. So there's decent
if I didn't make this clear off the top, we're going position by position with these. I know I said relevance as well, but we're going quarterbacks, then we're getting the running backs, wide receivers, so on.
And he's still got a decent cast with George Pickens. God, you talk about Justin Jefferson wanted to step in front of a bus. George Pickens has to deal with Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith.
At least Pickens has never known peace. That's one thing I'll say. True. Jefferson had Kirk, at least.
I do think that at least the Russ we saw last year was just very okay, very mid. The Kenny Pickett we saw was awful.
Yeah,
it was at the point where people were trying to tout Mason Rudolph as a startable quarterback. That's how bad Kenny Pickett is. So it's not a super inspiring thing. I don't think, while the offense may look better if we're talking from a fantasy perspective, we are looking at another 8 or 9 win Steelers with Russell Wilson at the helm.
Yeah, I think I agree. The one thing I'll say is the Steelers are making some moves on the defense as well to further put together the kind of formula I touched on last week.
Swiping Patrick Queen, man, is wild.
Yeah, Patrick Queen is a big get for them, and there's still a bunch of safeties out there that, you never know, the Steelers could end up with one of these guys. But yeah, overall, they're kind of just putting together that Browns formula of like, look, our quarterback may not be the best, our weapons are probably, hopefully good enough, but we're going to just, hope that those guys keep the boat sailing, and the defense is going to be the one that really, really drives us home. Pat, Baker Mayfield is in fact staying home. This is another one of those deals that dropped before the actual legal tampering window because it's their own player. Deal for 3 years, $100 million. I think this was probably a necessary move for the Buccaneers. Unless you find yourself in the same position as the Vikings and the Broncos, where there's just not really another answer out there. I will say that I believe this move and just kind of the Bucs team comp as a whole is kind of locking them into a pretty hard ceiling. I don't believe that this is a team that's going to be able to realistically compete for a Super Bowl. But it's at least going to keep them competitive. And with re-signing Mike Evans, I mean, it was kind of inevitable and completely necessary because Mike Evans was not going to come play with Kyle Trask or whoever the fuck, at least I don't think.
Hang on. And they re-signed Chase Edmonds.
Oh, my God. Fucking
They're getting the whole gang back together.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. But you're right. And, again, similar Steelers. 8 or 9 win territory here for the Bucs. But that might be enough to win the NFC South. We've seen the NFC South be horrible. It's funny because we both liked the Falcons last year, and now we like them more. So we're gonna kind of just sound like the same thing we did last year. Like, the Falcons should, but that's still a very winnable division, and that will be enough for the Bucs. But yeah, they're not gonna be contending for any Super Bowls with Baker Mayfield. But in terms of continuity, in terms of hanging on to Mike Evans, we'll see how they do without Dave Canales. Maybe without the QB whisperer there. We might see a little fall off. I'm a little bit worried about that, but yeah, just a very like you hear about that move and you go, yep, that's what they had to do.
Like obviously they were going to do that. Yeah. Look, it's one of those moves that it's like if you're a fan of the Bucs, I think you can talk yourself into, our team is good enough. Like maybe we can make a run, all this stuff. And sometimes that's just the position a team finds themselves in. And that's where they're at. Like, they're not going to be a bad team. I think they are going to compete for the division. And as much as I think the Falcons are probably going to be the favorites for it, look, the Bucs just won it and could very well just do it again. And any team is an injury or a handful of injuries away from their conference being completely shaken up. So as long as you are building your team in with a vision of being competitive, you could very well find yourself with another division crown there in Tampa, and they just seem to be stacking them up at this point. Pat, maybe the biggest quarterback news of the entire week. The Raiders signed Gardner Minshew. This was notable for essentially one reason and one reason only, and we'll get to that guy in a couple minutes here. Right before Gardner Minshew put pen to paper, or I guess he can't actually put pen to paper till Wednesday, right before this deal got announced.
Verbal pen to paper.
Verbal pen to paper. Right before that happened, rumors had started heating up a little that Justin Fields could find his way back to Las Vegas and reunite with Luke Getsy. Gardner Minshew going to the Raiders essentially renders that highly unlikely, if not impossible. I think it's weird that a guy like Gardner Minshew, who is one of those quarterbacks that's a journeyman, just constantly replaceable if you need to, but you don't go out and actively bring him in if you're also planning to bring in Justin Fields, because this team does still have Aiden O'Connell, and despite what anyone may think of Aiden O'Connell, he's going to at least be on the roster here for the next couple years, or at least for this year, in a backup role at the very least. So they're not going to carry 3 quarterbacks. And so this basically precludes them from going after Justin Fields now, which leaves Justin Fields sort of homeless. But Pat, how do you feel about Gardner Minshew going to your Raiders and kind of what this means for you guys in the immediate future, I guess?
I don't love it. I think Gardner Minshew is just a guy with a hard ceiling. Like we talked about ceiling with Baker Mayfield and Russell Wilson. This guy's ceiling is made of fucking bricks, man. You're not getting through that thing.
No.
And we saw Devontae Adams flourish a couple of years ago under Derek Carr. And the one thing Derek Carr did was throw the ball downfield. We saw him suffer last year with Jimmy Garoppolo and then, to a lesser extent, Aiden O'Connell, because they don't throw the ball down the field. And Gardner Minshew also does not throw the ball down the field very well. And I think if you were trying to play to your strengths, you would want someone better. But then the more I thought about it, who would that have been? It could have been Justin Fields. But you're giving stuff up for them, and that's a team that still has a lot of needs. I mean, I basically love the additions. The subtractions they have are going to hurt, but the few additions they brought in are great. But that's a team that still has so many other needs where it's like you don't want to give up assets for a quarterback, whether it's Justin Fields or whether it's the trade up for, say, J.J. McCarthy or whatever. Yeah, it's just very lukewarm. Like, it's not one of those things to be excited about, but I don't know how much better they could have done.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, there's a lot of teams that we've talked about and will talk about that it's like there's just not a lot of answers out there. It's like these are all teams I expect to, take a swing on some of these quarterbacks, maybe in the later rounds of the draft, just to hopefully get a chance at maybe hitting on a guy who's better than you expect. As I go full screen here because Pat has clearly exited out of our tab. Welcome back, Pat. What happened there?
What do you think? I'm a boomer, and I went to click on my tab next to it and hit the X.
That's what I figured happened.
Damn it.
It's all right. I was saying that I think the Raiders, like many teams, are in a position where it's like there's no clear answer, but I expect them to be one of the teams that kind of take a swing at a quarterback in the draft potentially, and
if possible,
hope that they turn into something. And again, that would, I guess, put them back at 3 quarterbacks on the roster, which I said they wouldn't do. But that's a point where, like, if you have a guy like if it's Bo Nix, or if it's, you go even later, if it's Joe Milton or something, and they impress you, yeah, you could probably get rid of Aiden and it'll be fine. But yeah, it sucks. It sucks to be in QB purgatory. It just always does. So I think Gardner Minshew is a fine, like, tread water move. He's a guy who had the Colts on the verge of a playoff spot this year. I mean, granted, I credit that a lot to Shane Steichen.
I was about to say the exact same thing. Yep.
Yeah, but hey, Gardner Minshew still was a piece of that. So we know he's capable of it in the right situation. Yeah, Pat, I don't think you're expecting the Raiders to win the Super Bowl this year. I don't think you were going to be expecting that either way. This is kind of just a move to make for now, and he's at least fun. He's at least a fun guy.
I was going to say, he's kind of like Jimmy G, but less handsome and more fun.
Way more fun. Way less of a pompous douche. Okay, well, Gardner Minshew seeming like he's going to be the Raiders quarterback heading into next season. Meanwhile, the other move we led off the show with in a more cinematic and dramatic fashion, Mac Jones, his time in New England has come to an end. He's going to Jacksonville for a 6th-round pick. Interesting move to me from the Jags side, because why? Obviously, you have Trevor Lawrence, and obviously Mac Jones is going to be the backup. I don't think there's going to be any sort of QB competition going on here, but it brings up the question of, like, why are you giving up an asset, even though it's a lower asset, for a guy to be your clear backup when CJ Beathard's under contract? Like, what is the plan here? It has to just be as simple as they think Mac is a higher upside backup than Beathard, and should something happen to Trevor, you're throwing Mac out there and you're feeling a little better about it. I guess I understand it from that perspective. It's just a little weird to me because they were the only team to really make any sort of offer. Very thankful anyone made an offer for Mac Jones. But yes, Mac Jones, the era of Mac is over in New England. If you blinked, you missed it. There weren't a whole lot of highlights. I think he grittied at the Pro Bowl and maybe threw a couple touchdowns to Hunter Henry.
He grittied at the what?
he wittily hit the Gwitty at the Pro Bowl, Pat.
He made the I think that's the biggest thing to take away from that.
Right. Well,
he was at the what?
His rookie year, he was good, bro. If Tyler Huntley can make a Pro Bowl, a literal backup, then Mac Jones.
That was just a meme. Fans were memeing, and I love it. But
whatever. Yes, Pro Bowler Mac Jones. I mean, honestly, 6th-round pick is a bargain if you're getting a Pro Bowler for it. So look, for the Jags, interesting. For the Patriots, it is a representation of the fresh start that we knew was coming. Mac had very much overstayed his welcome, and now he clears out a spot for Jacoby Brissett.
Another Belichick product.
Yes, we are bringing Jacoby Brissett back in. Pat, I don't, and look, maybe this is just a bias because I've followed the Patriots, this whole process, but I don't think any team is following, like, the script of their offseason plan better than the New England Patriots. Like, every move the Patriots have made outside of signing Antonio Gibson, which we'll talk about as well. Like, everything the Patriots have done is like, yeah, this is what we thought they were going to do a couple weeks ago. You get Jacoby Brissett to be your veteran bridge quarterback because he's been in the system before and he's good enough to start the whole year if need be and have a watchable product on the football field. Install that new offense into New England that he is already familiar with Alex Van Pelt. Just such an obvious quarterback move for them to make, and I love it. And then outside of that, the other moves they made were just ensuring that their in-house free agents don't leave, which was just as important. Kyle Duggar, Mike Onwenu, and Hunter Henry and Josh Uche actually
Yep.
re-signed today. So the Patriots certainly keeping their own around. The only other thing that would, really complete the script of what was written for them would be if they can finish off the Calvin Ridley signing, which we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But for now, I love the Brissett signing, and I think this is absolutely the right move as the Patriots try to slowly rebuild this thing.
Yeah, I think that based on what we think the Patriots are going to do, which is draft a quarterback at 3, whether it's Jaden Daniels or Drake May.
JJ McCarthy, I shoot myself and you don't ever see me again. Continue.
There is off the bench is no more, but
Yeah.
off the bench with bench warmer Pat. Yeah, I just retain all of your social media following, and
I'll put it in the will.
oh, let's go. But yeah, if they do decide to do that and say, hey, we want this guy to have 6 weeks or a whole year, you've got a guy that at the very least will hold the fort down. That in an offense that should be better than last year, and also familiar with the Alex Van Pelt offense when they were both together in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And again, if you do decide to say, hey, we took this guy 3rd overall, we think he's ready, we're ready to throw him in there week 1. If something goes wrong, you've got a guy, arguably the most reliable backup in the league for the last few years. We saw it in Indy, we saw it in Cleveland. When he gets in the game, he's fine. He's not going to be a negative, and I think that's really what the Patriots need right now. They need all the negatives gone.
Yeah, the Patriots are just in as flexible of a situation as you can be. Like, Jacoby Brissett is signing with the understanding that he may start 0 games, he may start 5 games, he may start 17 games, and all of those I'm okay with, as long as, the development of whoever we draft at 3, assuming that quarterback is still the plan, is going according to plan. If they think he's developing the right way, I'm okay with him sitting for as long as necessary. Like, you don't see that very often these days in the NFL, Pat. We talked about that last week, but it does happen every so often. Jared Goff didn't really play his rookie year, and granted, he didn't work out in St. Louis and then LA ultimately, but he still has turned into a very solid NFL quarterback. And so, you still do see it every once in a while. And I think the Patriots, based on what their expectations should be from the fan base, I mean, you may have the delusional ones, but based on the expectations, I think we're going to be okay with however things play out, as long as, we're seeing some development along the way. So I love the move to bring in
It's one of those things where the wins may not be there necessarily, but honestly, that's okay. Get another draft pick and keep building what you're trying to build. Who expects a team with a brand new quarterback, brand new head coach, that in a team that was a dumpster fire the year before, to completely turn it around? Hello, Texans. But I don't know. But that the Patriots don't scream that kind of turnaround to me right now.
I mean, look, if we trade back into the top 5 after selecting a QB at 3, then we can talk about maybe a more immediate turnaround.
Yeah.
But assuming we go the logical route of not fucking doing that, because that was crazy and also awesome, it's going to be a slower thing. And next season for the Patriots is going to be very much about actually watching the team and seeing how they look week to week and seeing the progression. Because like you said, Pat, the wins may not be there, but if you don't watch any Patriots games as an outside observer, and you just see in the standings, oh, they went 5-12, and you automatically assume the season was a failure, that's a mistake. It may have been. Maybe things went terrible and nobody looked good. We have no weapons, nothing to build off of. Or maybe we are building and you can still end up with a 5-12 record with that being the case. So we'll see how it all goes. Pat, replacing Jacoby Brissett as backup in Cleveland, you've got Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston and Deshaun Watson are now in the same quarterback room. I hope that room is monitored at all times.
I plead the 5th.
I sure you do. Look, lateral-ish move as far as a replacement goes. I mean, it's a very different type of quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett is like steady Eddie, like he will come in and do what he needs to do.
Well, but they went to Joe Flacco, who was basically chucking just like Jameis would, without some of the red flags, as we have just spoken about here. So I think it's an upgrade over Joe Flacco in the sense that Jameis is not 38 or however old Joe Flacco is right now.
Yeah, you're right. I apologize. I misspoke thinking that Jacoby was with the Browns last year. The Browns started every quarterback other than Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby,
Yeah, they probably wish they had him.
Yeah, Jacoby obviously in Washington last year. I was just thinking of him in that orange and brown uni. But yes, not replacing Jacoby, but is the new backup in Cleveland, replacing Joe Flacco. So, I mean, I don't know. Is Jameis the better quarterback there? Like, are we rooting for Jameis to start?
Jameis is all aura at this point. Let's be real.
Yeah,
Let's be real. Everybody loves him because, he's funny and does like the W thing in his mouth and says ridiculous things in the huddle and after games and just goes absolutely chucking. But that has not been a very productive way. Like the Saints, if he couldn't break through in New Orleans with the competition that he was facing post Drew Brees, I don't think it's going to happen. Like, I don't think this guy is a starter material. Is he one of the better backups in the league? Yes. And certainly the ceiling is higher because if he just, magically all those deep bombs are caught by his own players and not opponents maybe, but I still think Deshaun's a better quarterback, but regardless, the success of that team lies almost solely on Deshaun Watson. Like, who cares about, because like, if the Browns have to turn into Jameis, that's not good. That's not a good sign. We saw them do a lot, but like it's more so just not a good sign for them going forward. If Deshaun needs to have a considerable turnaround this year, or that is going to, we talk about it week in, week out, how bad that trade is and how it's probably only gonna get worse.
Yeah, unless Deshaun has a massive turnaround. Yeah, that is a rough one. But hey, decent enough backup quarterback option at the very least for Jameis Winston going to Cleveland. It doesn't leave them with just, Dorian Thompson-Robinson or Jay Walker or whoever the fuck they wanted to bring on board there.
Time to talk about white Jameis Winston, man. Drew Lock.
Yes, Drew Lock has signed with the New York Giants, and Pat, do I say it?
Say it.
I think he could take the job.
I think you could too. See, I think this is a case where if Daniel Jones struggles, they are going to be far more inclined to give Drew Lock. Did I say Luck? Yeah, Drew Lock
and Drew
a shot, as opposed to Tyrod Taylor or God forbid Tommy Meatballs or whatever the fuck. That fucking
Tommy DeVito.
That guy's not even mid. That guy is just bad. That guy had a couple of fun weeks and is Italian, and people in the New York and New Jersey area, Mike Francesa's busy creaming themselves.
Yeah.
But I'm getting off track here. Sorry. But I think Drew Lock is a bit more, I feel like it would inspire them more to make that change if Daniel Jones continues to underwhelm. Because, again, the Giants are trying to build something decent around them. They've made some more additions on the offensive line. Like, we saw them 2 years ago make playoffs. Like, they're at the very least ready to contend for a playoff spot. Mm-hmm. But again, it all rides on Daniel Jones. And unlike the Browns, who had a great defense and a great offensive line and whatnot, the Giants aren't going to be able to fall back on that. So if they're in a position, especially with how desperate Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are going to be, their seat is on fire. Like, they're one of the hottest seats in the league. They need to win games. And if Daniel Jones stinks, I feel like, again, Drew Lock would be a far more palatable change than some of these other guys they've had.
Yeah, there has been, some smoke that the Giants are getting a little tired of Daniel Jones. And, it's an interesting season for that to come off of because he was hurt for so much of it. But I understand because I hated the contract from the beginning. So, look, Drew Lock being, kind of breathing down his neck now, he's either going to light a fire under Danny or it's going to be his ultimate replacement. And I feel like Drew Lock he's going to start some games over a healthy Daniel Jones at some point next year. Whenever that is or however many that is, I don't know, but I could very well see it happening.
I will say, the Giants made a mistake last year in the sense that they should have paid Saquon and then tagged Daniel Jones.
Yes.
Because they're obviously Saquon, we'll talk about Saquon, but obviously that deal would have been an overpay and would have, hindered them in other areas in terms of money. But now they're stuck with Daniel Jones paying him so much money when realistically they could be stuck with overpaying a very good running back. Like, hindsight's 20/20, but looking back, if they could redo that decision, I think they'd flip it.
It's always fascinating to me, the NFL compared to other sports, just because of how important and how much teams evaluate the quarterback position, that it's like they are deathly afraid of Daniel Jones becoming, a really good quarterback and they accidentally let him go, versus actually just evaluating him for what he is, which is not that good. Like this is how desperate teams are. This is how desperate teams are to find like a superstar quarterback or a quarterback that can get them over the hump, because they will, twist themselves into a fucking pretzel trying to keep them around, even though they're not necessarily worth it. But hey, that is the bed the Giants made, and now they will lie in it. Pat, all of these quarterback moves are being made, and there's one that has still not been made. Justin Fields. Is he even going to get traded at this point? Because this
Yes.
market has dried up so much. Like we expected, this was the one trade that we've really been talking about and speculating about for months, ever since the Bears secured the number one pick.
Yeah.
And yet this is now the one move that, the dust is starting to settle from free agency. We've seen some other trades being made, and yet Justin Fields is still a Chicago Bear. Where can he even go? And is there? I don't even think he's starting next year. I don't think he's a starter.
I think there's only one spot he can start. Who's the only team that needs a quarterback that didn't make a move that was not in the top 3 picks? It's Denver. Mm-hmm. Denver's the only other team that I could see him going to right now in starting. Because, again, if Caleb Williams will start in Chicago over him. Either Jaden Daniels or Drake May would start over him in Washington. Mm-hmm. So, I do think at this point he won't be a starter. And I heard Philly, Indy, which is bizarre because similar in skill sets to the starting quarterbacks. They're more of these mobile guys, but yeah, I was talking about it last week. We were hypothetically putting Kirk in Atlanta, Russ in Pittsburgh, the JJ McCarthy to the Broncos. And I said, there's not many places left for him. The only other place too is Minnesota. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, I just don't see either of those things happening. I mean, we could talk about the Broncos after this in terms of what the hell are they doing, but does he deserve to start in this league? I think so. I think he's one of the top 32 quarterbacks in the league, but it's just the scenario. It's like we saw teams like the Raiders kind of rather say, hey, we'll take this guy with way lower upside and, give up less assets. It's just really unfortunate, but they are still going to trade him. Could you imagine if they didn't trade him with all the talk, all this drama, for him to still be there as a backup? That's just not necessary. They are going, but the problem is now if you're Philly and you're trading for him as a backup, that value goes way down because you're not getting your starting quarterback.
Yeah, I mean it's gone from the early field speculation discussions was okay, maybe they can get a first, and it's no, but maybe they can get a second. Now it's if he's going to get traded to be a backup, you're not getting anything better than a fourth, I can't imagine, because that's, I believe, what was traded for Trey Lance. So, you're looking at that kind of compensation for Chicago. I will say Chicago has definitely kept their they've kept their wording pretty loose and generic as it relates to Fields. They've kind of kept open the idea of if he ends up staying around, maybe, whatever. While it was the whole time, it was if you read between the lines, it was obvious that they wanted to and were probably going to trade him, but they have not closed the door on him being around. So I don't think they've burned that bridge, but yeah, gun to my head, I still think he gets traded, but I am starting to think he gets traded to be a backup somewhere for maybe a 4th-round pick, either in Indy to Anthony Richardson or in Philly to Jalen Hurts. And like you said, skill set wise, that makes a lot of sense.
I think there's a chance that he gets traded after the draft, which is crazy because you're thinking the Bears are going to want picks, but I think that market will open up for him. Say a team like the Broncos whiffs on JJ McCarthy, they can't trade up and get him. What are they going to do? Jarrett Stidham, Raider legend Jarrett Stidham, and Patriot legend. But
Stidham's shown some flashes. You never know.
But it might be after that where teams kind of realize and say, "Oh shit, our QB room is not sufficient, and we've exhausted free agency and the draft, the two main ways to get an upgrade." And it might be till then. But if you're the Bears, though, it's that kind of defeats the whole purpose because you want to get those draft picks now and help build your team this year. It's a bizarre situation from a guy that has shown a lot of talent, a lot of potential, I will say, not a lot of talent, but the potential, the talent is there, but He's had some rough situations in Chicago, and it's just like he needs a change of scenery. And I think, God, I am lisping it up today. Change of scenery. If he gets a change of scenery, then we could at the very least see a passable quarterback.
Yeah, I understand it from the perspective of the passing production has been so brutal for him for basically his whole career now. And we've got, 2.5 years basically of sample size on Justin Fields. So I understand the frustration and kind of just being done with him at this point. But we'll see. I would love to see him get another chance as well and just see if maybe they could find something in a new situation. Pat, let's move on to the running backs here. And honestly, we may only get through the running backs and the receivers before we have to call it today. We'll try to touch on the defense.
It's a fantasy podcast.
That was 45.
We might just have to run down a list of names at that point.
Yeah, that was 45 minutes talking about the QBs. And honestly, the running backs are more interesting. So,
what a difference from this year to last year. And all these running backs were crying. It was because of the demand. That was a great running back class last year. And this year's running back class is not good. So, if you see established veterans, you're going to go and get them over, a rookie that you take in the 3rd or 4th round. So, that's why. Running backs were being all this and that last offseason. It's because they didn't need you. They didn't need you for that kind of money. But now this year, these teams are kind of like, oh, shit. And
this was also a much better crop of free agent running backs. Some of them were a little older. I mean, this was a good crop.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the biggest one here, or at least the most shocking one, seeing all the moves, the one that shocked me the most was my boy Josh Jacobs.
Agreed.
Heading over to Green Bay, and it mostly shocked me at the time because it's like Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones. Mm-hmm. Why? Nice update or whatever you got. What was the update? What do we have?
It was a fantasy baseball notification. No, somebody added Bo Naylor, if you must know.
Jesus.
So, I don't fucking know. But I agree with you. Most surprising move for sure.
But it made more sense when they got rid of Aaron Jones, where it's why did you sign him to that contract? This seemed like an inevitable thing where they were going to have to ask him to restructure. So it's why even do it in the first place? I guess to make him happy and keep him, but then he's gone. And I do think Josh Jacobs is an upgrade from Aaron Jones, mostly in, I don't know how old Aaron Jones is. I almost just declared him 50.
No, Jones is 29, Jacobs is 26. So there's about a 3.5 year age difference there, actually.
Yeah, so a bit of an age difference. Jacobs isn't quite as good of a pass catcher as Jones, but I think all in all, you're getting the better running back. But it was more so for the Packers. It's why did you do this with Aaron Jones? The whole free Aaron Jones thing, they almost really imprisoned him as a backup, as a true backup.
They freed him more than he's ever been freed.
They freed him more than he's ever been freed. It's just, I will miss Josh Jacobs in Las Vegas, but as a team that did nothing, they did not sign a running back. They are going to go with Zamir White, it seems. And I'm completely fine with that. But at the same time, it's Josh Jacobs is still a very good running back, and I still think he is going to be a very big piece of what we saw as a potentially explosive offense at the end of the year last year with Jordan Love.
Yeah, right now it's Zamir White's season in Las Vegas, and I'm going to avoid saying anything declarative about what I think he'll do in fantasy or certain guys here, because that's a backfield that could very well get a running back added to it through the draft, and even if it's a 3rd or 4th round guy, that could be a guy that's still competing with Zamir White and could ultimately eat into his touches a lot. But for right now, definitely a good first step for Zamir White, getting Josh Jacobs out of there, and for him to go to Green Bay, a good fit for Josh Jacobs as well, seeming like he's going to get really all the work he can handle. And one interesting thing about that contract is it's basically a 1-year deal with team options afterward. All the guaranteed money is pretty much up front, or at the very least they can get out of it after 2 years with only $6 million in dead cap left on the deal. So much of it was wrapped up in about a $12 million signing bonus. So basically a 1-year deal for Josh Jacobs, and I think the Packers kind of trying to capitalize on, them having a seemingly very good quarterback now and trying to maximize the weapons around him. Still a little bit of a surprise that, Aaron Jones, fan favorite, was just kind of thrust aside there. And I know many Packer fans not thrilled about it. And what they're especially not thrilled about, Pat, is Aaron Jones going to the Minnesota Vikings and staying in the division. That, I'll say this from my perspective, I'm very sad. RIP Ty Chandler season. I wanted more so than we'll talk about Tyjae Spears in a couple seconds, but more than anything, I wanted Ty Chandler season, and it doesn't seem like we're going to get it, at least not until Aaron Jones goes down with his annual injury. But for now,
with
the
his
Vikings
annual,
have Aaron Jones.
calf injury that keeps him out for 8 weeks, but he plays one of the weeks in between.
Yeah. The Vikings now have Aaron Jones, and it's like, I referenced this meme a few times, but the meme of the Maserati or whatever the fuck in the shitty house. This is the reverse of that. The Vikings have such a great cast of weapons
with
around
Sam Darnold
motherfucking
or Jaron Hall. Yeah,
you got Justin. I know Hawkinson probably won't be ready to start the year, but either way, he's around in some respect. And you got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, and then Sam Darnold. I mean, hey, maybe Sam Darnold can do enough with those weapons, but Aaron Jones certainly going to be an interesting fantasy asset this year. I have really no idea what to make of him right now or where I should expect him to go, because he definitely feels too good for the dead zone still, which starts around round 4 or 5.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But I'm not spending a first 3-round pick on Aaron Jones, myself at least. That feels gross, right?
Because Ty Chandler is still lurking, and he is going to get some work, and you were all in on him, and he had a couple really great weeks towards the end of the year with Alexander Mattison out, but it's still Aaron Jones' backfield, and I wonder if they're going to kind of let him run wild the way they did with Dalvin Cook for so many years. And they probably wanted to do that with Alexander Mattison, but as we've pointed out several times, he is simply not very good. Aaron Jones is very good. And we've never seen him truly have a workhorse running back workload. And mostly because the guy gets hurt all the time. But also just with guys like A.J. Dillon and oh god, who was there? There was a fat running back there before him too that always just who the hell was
Eddie
it?
Lacy?
I feel like there was someone there before him that was also cucking him of touchdowns. But either way, if he can truly be that guy, again, 3 down back territory. Mm-hmm. And again, the question is just how good are the Vikings? So I think your assessment is pretty fair, where it's 3rd round, 4th round, you're not gonna love this guy as your RB1. He's
I feel like he almost has to be a late 3rd round pick at worst, just because of the pedigree he's put together and the fact that
he's still 29. It's not.
Yeah,
he's getting
20,
out there.
He's 29. I mean, they are, they're paying him a decent amount. It was a $7 million deal. That's the same annual money roughly as what Derrick Henry just got from the Ravens, and what, a lot of these annual value deal. I believe Tony Pollard, similar annual value there. So look, he's not, put it this way, as it stands right now on March 12th, 2024, I do not envision myself investing in Aaron Jones at all, given the age and the bad team. But he is a guy I could just as easily see burning my take on that and having a pretty good year as the primary back in Minnesota on a team that clearly wanted him pretty bad and is going to need some support from their run game if they go into the season with a quarterback be it Sam Darnold or a rookie. They're going to need that run game to kind of help them out. So if he's healthy, could certainly be an RB1 still. But just not one that I'm overly interested in myself.
Yeah,
more sad about Ty Chandler, if anything. Now, the biggest name move of the running back market, Saquon Barkley.
I know we both have
very far.
We've got strong feelings on
Eagles.
this. I think we have strong feelings about different aspects of this, but I think we both feel pretty strongly about this. You can go first. I feel like yours is more relevant.
Is mine about the Tiki Barber thing that you saw? Is that yes? Okay, so I tweeted today that Tiki Barber is a fucking dork and a loser because before Saquon even signed with the Eagles, it was when there were rumors that he might sign with the Eagles or even the Cowboys before free agency opened. Tiki Barber was going off about Saquon, Giants Nation wants to be able to root for you, they want to still be able to wear your jersey and follow your career, and they can do that if you go to a team like the Texans, but they can't do that if you go to a division rival, so don't do that. And then Saquon signs with the Eagles. Tiki's oh, you're dead to me. Will you shut the fuck up? What a selfish, just completely narcissistic way to view this. He is coming at this, Tiki Barber's coming at this situation with a perspective of he wants to be able to honor Saquon in the future. Saquon, respectfully, and I'm sure he knows this as well, has not accomplished anything in the NFL yet. He's had a couple of nice 1,000-yard seasons. His rookie year was electric, whatever. He hasn't won anything.
It's because of the team he played for.
Yeah, he hasn't won anything. He hasn't put together, consistent statistical seasons now in a couple years. He is now going to a place where he believes he can accomplish both of those things. And on paper, he absolutely can. The Eagles' O-line is great. They're a perennial playoff team, even though they, sputtered to the finish line this year. To act like Saquon should be prioritizing some halftime honoree ceremony 10 years from now because you want to bring him back and say, hey, thanks for putting up a couple 1,000-yard seasons for us. Because you want to preserve that, that's what he should base his free agency. Yeah, that's what he should base his free agency situation about.
Tiki Barber, who was a good running back that is not Hall of Fame caliber, won a Super Bowl. Saquon will never do that with the Giants.
Yeah,
but
this team didn't want him. They didn't want to pay him. He is now going somewhere that will pay him, that he thinks he can win, that they obviously value him. It's just such a delusional way of looking at it. We can't honor you at halftime in the future because, you went to a division rival. Now neither team is going to be able to. His point was if he flames out in Philly, then neither team is going to honor him and he's never going to have a place. I'm like, what the fuck kind of prioritization is that? He's still 25-year-old running back. He's still trying to build a legacy. He's not worried about, oh God, it was so dumb. It's a great fit for fantasy though, and a great fit for Saquon, other than that Jalen Hurts is going to steal a bunch of his touchdowns. But Daniel Jones was kind of doing that anyway.
I love the Adam Silver meme. Get ready to learn pushing Jalen Hurts' ass, buddy. That's a phenomenal meme. But obviously, great move for the Eagles. Great move for Saquon. I mean, DeAndre Swift had those couple of huge games. And as the Eagles kind of went down, so did he. And I think it's kind of a case of where DeAndre Swift just is not what people thought he was when he got drafted as a second round pick, big hot shot with the Lions. Now they trade him. I just don't think he's all that good. Saquon is very, very good. I've said it multiple times that I do not believe the running back himself. I feel like that's the least important of the three main pillars of a good run game, which are the system and the offensive line. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I wonder if B Diggs is listening. I remember when we were roommates in college watching this draft, and I kept saying the Giants are making a mistake. The Giants are making a mistake by taking Saquon at 2. Granted, I thought they should have taken Sam Darnold at the time.
Full circle, baby.
But
we love it.
But also is that they could have very well taken Quentin Nelson, which would have given their team a completely different trajectory. Because the biggest problem in Saquon's tenure was miserable offensive line play. Miserable.
Yeah.
And you start that, and that's the reason why now they had to go and use top 10 picks on Andrew Thomas, who after growing pains has turned out to look like an elite left tackle in this league. And then Evan Neal, who not so much moved to guard, and he's in one of those kind of put up or shut up seasons. They wouldn't have to do that as much if you take Quentin Nelson, solidify that offensive line. And again, if you've got a solid offensive line in what wouldn't have been a good system under Ben McAdoo, Pat Shurmur, Joe Judge, whoever the fuck was there. God, what
Patriot, Ben McAdoo.
That's what a horrible string of coaches they had. But it just changes the whole complexion of the team. Taking a running back that high, even if he is generational, on a team that had that many needs, just felt bound to fail. Bound to fail for me. And that's why now he's in a position where he leaves with nothing. Because he was on a terrible franchise that was mismanaged in so many different ways. And now everyone's all crying because he left that. A team that did not want to pay him. And again, granted, I don't necessarily blame them, as his prime is probably only a couple more years. But but yeah, if I'm him, this seems inevitable that he was going to get the hell out of there. Houston was kind of where I expected him to go. But the Eagles, man, that is hot. Maybe, they will move away from the tush push with a guy as good and dynamic as Saquon, who was healthy. Also, can't be remiss that he's healthy. He was very healthy last year, which is something that he struggled to do. But I guess now to be able to jump in to his replacement, which I don't hate, is Devin Singletary. obviously it's not like a wow Devin Singletary, but when I saw that, I was kind of like, okay, like yeah, like
Yeah.
he was good in Houston, pretty good. Obviously, he had some games where he's not very efficient, but we've just seen this guy be really steady, whether it was in Buffalo or whether it was in Houston. This guy has just been, you know what you're gonna get out of Devin Singletary.
You sure do. I mean, his stat lines from year to year for the last 3 years have been basically the same. You're looking at the mid 800s for total rushing yards, and then around 5-ish touchdowns. I mean, Buffalo in 2021, 870 yards, 7 touchdowns. 2022, 819 yards and 5 touchdowns, and then in Houston, 898 yards and 4 touchdowns. Granted, that was on the most carries he's ever seen in the season with 216. I think Singletary's a guy, just to bring it to the fantasy perspective, that depending where he goes, and I suspect he will probably be overlooked a little bit, especially going to a situation, as kind of icky as New York.
Epitome of a dead zone running back.
And yeah, epitome of a dead zone running back, and especially if they bring somebody in, that'll push his value probably even below the dead zone, because this is just not a guy that anybody's ever really cared to put any draft stock in fantasy, I don't believe.
And he's always had someone else.
Yeah.
Whether it was back in Buffalo. Oh my God, I'm forgetting who else was in Buffalo with him.
Zach Moss.
Zach Moss.
Yeah.
And then to go with Dameon Pierce. Like, what a disgusting combo.
Yeah.
Well, Zach Moss at the time was terrible. But yeah, he's never really had the chance to be the guy until the latter part of the year with Houston, and he looked good. Granted, Houston was a good offense at that point. The Giants, we just talked about Daniel Jones. They're probably still not going to be a very dynamic offense. But yeah, I don't. There were probably better options, but like getting Devin Singletary as opposed to Saquon allowed them to make signings elsewhere.
I agree. I look, Devin Singletary is not a guy I'm necessarily expecting a lot from in fantasy, not expecting a lot from production wise. I just want to say, put some respect on Devin Singletary's name, because I feel like people saw this signing and a lot of people were like, ew, that's gross. Like, no, he's a pretty good player. Like, especially if you're a Giants fan and you're just kind of, upset about Saquon leaving, and, you don't want to rely just on the draft for whatever his replacement is. Like, this is a guy you're going to enjoy. Like, he's a good player. So we'll see what his value ends up being, but I like the addition overall for New York. And just to circle back on Saquon really quick, Pat, I think Saquon might be one of the most hotly debated running backs once fantasy football season comes around. Not that it's going to be debatable whether he's like a first-round pick or at the very worst an early second-round pick. Same sort of range he was in this past year. I think he's just going to be hotly debated because of Jason Kelce retiring, the fate of the tush push being kind of unknown, and how much people believe Saquon himself has left. And I want to put my flag down right now. I'm a Saquon believer. I would take Saquon anywhere. Saquon, if I had to rank running backs, I mean, I'll have to actually look at it, but I can only think of Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, and Breece Hall as guys I definitely have above him right now. And then we can talk about it. But Saquon on the Eagles behind that line is very enticing. I'm not worried about the tush push like completely sapping his value. I really don't know if they're going to run it that much this year. Like on the 1 yard line, Jalen Hurts is going to be a threat to score regardless. Like that's just the threat you have with a guy like him, with a guy like Josh Allen, with any big quarterback that's willing to run and sort of put their body on the line. Like that's a play that's in your playbook.
Someone else's hands.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think Saquon's going to be just fine, even if he's not snapping up a bunch of goal line touchdowns, because he's that good. And this offense is going to be in a lot more scoring opportunities than New York has been for the last few years. So I love the move, and Saquon should be a lock it in first round pick. Now, the fantasy value of this guy will also be very interesting, Pat. The move we kind of all saw coming and have expected for maybe a year, over a year now. The Ravens have signed Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
He was the last real big running back domino to fall from free agency, and boy, he sure is big. The Photoshops look great. He does look good in Raven purple for some reason, I will say. And this is going to make the Ravens offense a big fucking problem for everyone, and hopefully do what I mentioned after the AFC Championship game, which is not allow the Ravens to abandon the run ever again. Like, ever again. If you have Derrick Henry in your backfield, you cannot forget that guy exists. The Ravens should have run the ball a lot more against the Chiefs than they did, even with the cast of guys they had. Now they have Derrick Henry. They have zero excuse, and I think they know that.
They've never had less of an excuse.
This is going to be a wild backfield of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. For the longest time, we've been waiting for a real threat running back to join this Ravens backfield with Lamar. We kept wanting it to be J.K. Dobbins. We wanted it to be a few different guys. Now you have a guy who's proven. The only concern with Derrick Henry, obviously, is he's over that age cliff, but it seems like Henry, to an extent at least, is kind of avoiding that age cliff. He had a pretty nice year this year.
He's Derrick Henry, man.
Still finished as an RB1 in fantasy. And, man, where is he going to go in fantasy now? Because this is a guy, this is a better situation. Yeah, this is a better situation than Tennessee, but again, more scoring opportunities, I would
And
assume.
you think about it, too. A lot of the times in Tennessee, his bad games are when he was phased out due to game script, where they were losing and needed to throw the ball.
Yeah.
Do we think the Ravens are going to be losing a whole lot?
No, they're not going to get game scripted out at least.
That's what I mean. At the very least, the games are going to be close. And so those dud games that he had last year in Tennessee that, makes his final, RB1 status both kind of deceiving yet impressive. Mm-hmm. That he was able to do that in essentially 4 less games than a full season without being injured. Is just crazy. But I think, again, it was more of an indication of the game script and not him. I think he still has at least enough left in the tank to be really productive in this offense. But man, again, this was just a match made in heaven.
Yeah, this is the one I'm probably most excited to actually see in action. I'm excited to turn on a Ravens game week 1 and see exactly what these two look like. What kind of fucking jail are these two going to put linebackers in with figuring out where the fuck to go?
Very little competition as well. It seems J.K. Dobbins will be gone. Keaton Mitchell's recovering from a torn ACL. Gus Edwards is already gone. And it's Justice Hill? I mean, maybe they'll draft someone, but I doubt that. It's he does not have a Tajay Spears. A young running back who was just bursting at the seams to I can't think right now. To break through is what I was thinking of. And he doesn't have that. He doesn't have that there. So just a really, 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 really good situation.
Yeah, I would agree. The move that we kind of all expected. Now, a move that was, I think, a little less expected, Pat, you mentioned Tajay Spears. The Titans are going to replace Derrick Henry with Tony Pollard. Now, Tony Pollard didn't have a clear destination, I think, that was speculated on, and so I guess
I thought he was going to go back to Dallas.
Yeah, I think anything other than him going back to Dallas, or maybe going to New York to replace Saquon as kind of another interdivisional swap, anything other than that would have been a surprise, and that's what this qualifies as. It's a little bit of a surprise. Tony Pollard to Tennessee, the biggest takeaway from this is, unfortunately, R.I.P. Tajay Spears season.
Yeah, and honestly, I think RIP Tony Pollard season as well, because I think this is going to be a case where both of these guys get a lot of work. I think this is going to be a pretty even split, because you've got Tony Pollard, who has shown that he excels more so in that part-time role. Mm-hmm. They gave him the job. Obviously, he did not recover from that fractured, broken leg for, he claims week 11, and then the stats did get better. PFF really liked him after that point. So, but again, not to say that he's some kind of RB1 that we all thought he was. He was one of my pals last year. You put him in that with Tajay Spears, who, again, is this kind of budding running back, but, maybe doesn't deserve to be a complete bell cow just yet. I think they could definitely coexist, but again, that does not, have a ton of optimism fantasy-wise, because you look at, Pollard and Zeke. They were the Cowboys. Dak Prescott, they had a strong offense. This is the Titans' first year under Brian Callahan, with Will Levis at the helm, with with receiver questions. It's I don't love these two. We will be talking about these guys in our Dead Zone episode for sure.
Yeah.
But I really don't like it for either of them fantasy-wise.
Yeah, some moves are just logical and good from a real life perspective, and they are just end up being gross for fantasy. I think that's what this is. Like, Tony Pollard is a good running back. I understand the Titans not thinking Tyjae Spears is enough as much as we wanted to see him get the full workload. Like, I understand from a business perspective as an NFL team, you don't want to put all that pressure on him necessarily. And yeah, I think it's a decent signing. It just makes me not really want either of them in fantasy. It's like, yes, everyone has a certain value, and maybe I'll end up with a couple shares of them if they fall far enough because of this ambiguity of the situation. But in general, kind of gross. Less gross, I feel, but maybe not the best. I don't know. Friend of the pod, Austin Eckler, has signed with the Washington Commanders. This is kind of the situation we expected him to end up in, where he's going to be a complimentary back and certainly a pass catching specialist. Now, I think a complimentary back might be a slight injustice. I think he's going to get more work than that, but he's paired with Brian Robinson now in Washington. Brian Robinson is a pretty unspectacular runner. He was a guy who kind of volumed his way to fantasy relevance this year. And I'll say this, and this is not just because he came on this show, I do still believe Austin Eckler has a good chunk left in the tank to at least be productive this year, maybe next year. He was dealing with the injury this year, and as long as he can heal from that properly, I think you could still see a semblance of the electricity we saw from him in LA. Maybe not at the peak of his powers, but something a little closer to it. I like the signing for the Commanders, and if you're in a PPR league, Pat, I like it as a flex guy.
Certainly more in a PPR league, which again will establish all leagues should be PPR leagues at this point. It's 2024.
We will be next year. Yay,
hooray!
Finally
Thank
coming
fuck.
out of the Stone Age.
We don't have to talk about that every week. We don't have to declare that. But
because we are not a PPR.
I am certainly not as optimistic about it as you are for all parties involved. One, because just like, who knows what this Washington offense is going to look like under either Drake May or Jaden Daniels. They just might be pretty bad again. A lot of growing pains, which it's good to have a veteran like that. And again, Brian Robinson, true, a lot of it was volume based, and we did see him get a surprising amount of volume in the passing game as well, which I don't really think anyone expected from him. I think it completely tanks Brian Robinson's value. Brian Robinson is like a borderline handcuff, I think.
I think Brian Robinson's a dead zone back because he's a primary back. He's going to be the primary back theoretically, and probably get the goal line opportunities. But yeah, he's not a guy I'm excited about at all.
And does Eckler still have something in the tank? Yes, probably, but I just don't think it is a whole lot. God, this guy's never going to come back on the show, and if he does, he's going to verbally abuse me. But
he sees the criticism. He's cool about it.
But not to say that it's a bad move. It's a better move for Washington than it is for him. I will say. I just think that offense may not be good, and with Brian Robinson and with unknown at quarterback, or if they stick with Sam Howell, God forbid, for a year to let the other guy develop, it's just not. When I saw that one, I kind of grimaced because I saw the Commanders and the Raiders were in on him, and I'm like, the Raiders, that would be great. That would have been a great fit. But when I saw the Commanders, I was just like, ugh. That was my first reaction. Thank you, Austin, for coming on the podcast.
I think the workload will be there, which is what I'm excited. There was, with Antonio Gibson leaving, there was a vacancy for that role. My concern was that he would go somewhere where there wasn't a clear role for his pass catching abilities. I think the fact that he fits as well is at least keeps me somewhat optimistic, even if the team is doo-doo. Pat, we'll try. Go ahead.
Yeah, try speed run.
Yeah, we got to try to start speed running through some of these. So there's really two more big running back moves that happened. The Bears signed DeAndre Swift, which that was the move that kicked off free agency, and everyone was just like,
it's just kind of gross. Just really gross, unfortunately.
It kills any optimism on Roschon Johnson, at least for this year. Not that I or you, I don't think, was super in on him, but he was still a guy that, he was going to head into his second year, maybe have a bigger role. Well, now they've got Swift, Johnson, and Khalil Herbert, I believe, is still around and under contract. So Swift is... Swift is on the Bears, guys. I don't really have any fantasy-wise, gross.
Again, kind of second year in a row, we're going to be looking at this Bears offense going into the year, the Bears backfield, going into the year, just being ew.
Yeah, I have no idea what the Bears backfield is going to look. Honestly, is it similar to the Eagles backfield heading into last year? Because I think Khalil Herbert is a more proven commodity than Rashad Penny. The real debate was between Swift and Penny, right? But
I barely saw a touch all year.
Yeah, that was a whiff. Look, if anything, we know they're going to try to work in Swift plenty because they are paying him and whatever. But overall, certainly not an exciting landing spot, even in a potential Caleb Williams-led offense. Now, this one was interesting, Pat, kind of the last big name that moved. Texans trade for Joe Mixon. Initially, it was reported that Joe Mixon was cut. Texans said, hey, wait a minute, we'll send you a 7th-round pick for him. So they did that. Joe Mixon is going to be their replacement for Devin Singletary. And I like the move a lot, and especially with the report that they are not done adding to this backfield. They want to kind of have it be potentially a 2-headed backfield or whatever. They are looking for other impact playmakers in this backfield, and I think that is perfect when you bring in Joe Mixon, who is, I think, declining, but still a pretty damn good running back, and is going to be an upgrade. Like we talked up Devin Singletary, Pat. I still think Joe Mixon in this current iteration is a much better running back than Devin Singletary. I do agree. So they bring in Mixon. They maybe bring in somebody else. I think we're looking at a better run game to support C.J. Stroud here, which is definitely what we're looking for.
I guess at this point, too, we can just talk about what the Bengals did, which was bring in Zach Moss. But I think the biggest thing to report today is that the Bengals really like Chase Brown. And, obviously I think he had like a hamstring injury last year, something that really slowed him down. And they were very, very cautious with easing him back in. But we saw at the end of the year, he had that, like a 70-yard catch and run, I believe. In a Monday night game that I was in the hospital for. I remember that lives against the Jaguars. Yeah. And I think that's more indicative of the fact that Chase Brown is on the up. Zach Moss is a guy that we saw produce really well in Indianapolis last year before Jonathan Taylor came back. But yeah, again, not an ideal fantasy backfield for a team that has been so cut and dry the last 5 or so years. That it's always been Joe Mixon. You never really thought about the backup. Now you're thinking about kind of a committee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, look, it's a situation where Chase Brown can and probably will easily take over Zach Moss at some point. Like I don't know if this is a situation where
I've only seen him be good 1 year.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like Zach Moss heads into the year as a starter and then Chase Brown slowly eats away at it. Either way, Chase Brown's the guy you want. If this is the end of their backfield additions, if this is what their backfield looks like heading into next year, I think Chase Brown is going to be maybe the most hyped sleeper, and he'll probably become not a sleeper in fantasy.
I've got him in my dynasty league, and I was hyped. I was hyped reading those reports today.
It's always good when you have like an investment in a player and that player's team signs a guy that you know is not a threat, because it's like these guys are going to have players signed.
Joe
to their
Mixon was
teams.
way more threatening than Zach Moss, in my opinion.
These guys are going to have players signed to their teams. It's just how it goes. You're not going to be alone on a depth chart ever. But when your team signs a guy who is provenly, Zach Moss had a nice year, but is provenly taking back seats to other running backs and has never really been consistently good. It's definitely
thank God Indy didn't sign anybody. Feed Jonathan Taylor the fucking football. I don't want to see anybody else getting a carry ever again in that backfield besides him.
Pat. It's Evan Hull season once he recovers.
For God's sake.
All right. I mentioned this before. The Patriots signed Antonio Gibson.
Ew.
Whatever. Look, the team is starving. The team is starving for weapons. I think he's going to be a guy that they actually might use all over the field, kind of as a receiver potentially. He'll be fun. I don't think he'll have too much fantasy value playing behind Ramondre Stevenson, but I like it as a Patriots fan, as a real-life addition. And then Pat called this one, Gus Edwards to the Chargers. It was a very logical move, and it did come to pass.
With Greg Roman, and, again, I think this leaves the door wide open for them to draft someone, whether it's the Blake Corum thing, if they go by the script or not. But I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities because we both expect this, almost at San Diego, Los Angeles offense to be better. To be better. And they also get Will Dissly, so, it shows that, they want to be more physical. They want to be a more physical team. And Gus is a great fit, and he's great at the goal line. Whether it was Linsanity-esque or not, he is great at the goal line. So I don't expect him to be the only one, but he will certainly have, at the very least, you're going to draft him as a guy that you think might be, you're not going to just draft him and be like, oh, maybe this will work out. You're going to draft him thinking, I can realistically play this guy.
Yeah, for sure. Like, no matter who they draft, really, this is a guy that, like, you can see the role for him. Even if he becomes just a touchdown guy, that can still have its value in fantasy.
That'll work.
And if it all, maybe it all goes according to plan and Gus Edwards really ends up just being the guy there. Maybe they don't find anybody they really like in the draft. I mean, I'm sure they will draft a running back, but maybe it's a guy with 5th round capital, 6th round capital, and Gus is the dude. And that could certainly put him on, like, RB2 radar. Maybe RB1 some weeks. We'll see. Okay. We'll run through the wide receiver market really quick, which this won't take as long anyway because it has been slow, Pat. And this is
funny.
Another lesson that free agent markets go along with the draft class, and this is expected to be a very loaded wide receiver draft, which is why the receivers are not really moving around much as far as free agency goes. It's been more active trade-wise, actually. I guess we could start there because the Deontay Johnson trade was the most recent move that made. It happened right before we came on the pod today. He is going to the Panthers for it's Deontay Johnson and a pick for Dante Jackson.
Dante Jackson, yeah.
And, I think this is, very similar names. Good move. Bryce Young needs weapons. Deontay Johnson is one of the best route runners in the entire league, I think. A+ for the Panthers.
To the top of that depth chart, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%, and becomes the only relevant Panther for fantasy maybe right now. Like, still not, like, that offense is still so bad that I'm like, but with Dave Canales and just hopefully some year 2 progression from Bryce, Deontay Johnson is a guy that I am at least moderately interested in now.
And I love it for George Pickens. I've been talking about how I love George Pickens. I want George Pickens to break out. He's on my dynasty team as well. And this obviously opens the door for him to be the only wide receiver who they signed someone bad, like to replace Allen Robinson. They they got someone funny.
Oh gosh, they did. Man, I don't remember. Let me try to find it because
Steelers free agency.
Steelers signed wide receiver. Why did that just come up? Darius Hayward Bay. I don't think it's him. They signed Gunnar Olszewski.
No, that wasn't the one I was thinking of.
That's not the one? Okay. Then, yeah, I don't fucking know. They also signed, 2 months ago, they signed Marquez Callaway. Anyway, we keep going. There was another trade that did actually go through, and this was before free agency opened as well. Jerry Jeudy to the Browns.
I don't care.
One, yeah, right, like, hey. Cool.
Wow, that's great.
Like, I Pat, at this point, I'm done with Jerry Jeudy. Like, I think he's a relatively talented player. I don't think he's ever going to reach the heights that we want him to. I think he's going to be a perennially frustrating player for both fan bases and fantasy owners. I'm kind of over him. I think the Broncos are over him, and I think it says a lot that a team as generally poorly run as the Browns, from a GM level, traded for him. Because look, the Browns are very well coached. They were very good this year, but they make some very questionable moves, and I think this is another one of them. I don't think Jerry Jeudy doesn't move the needle for me.
Exactly, that's just the way I see it. Is just like cool, love it, like it for Cortland Sutton more. But even Jeudy was not a factor there last year, even when he was healthy and playing. So yeah, he clearly goes behind Amari Cooper. He clearly goes behind David Njoku as the third option in an offense that is still going to run a fuck ton.
Yeah, and an offense that has a quarterback that is still not proven he can hit his targets on a consistent basis and actually be a producer with Deshaun Watson. Okay, I guess it's really surrounding the AFC North. The AFC North has been somewhat involved in all of these wide receiver trades. So this was not a trade that got done, but a trade that was requested. T. Higgins, after being franchise tagged, has requested a trade. This happened couple days, 2 days ago now, and there's really been no movement on it as of yet, so we'll see if this actually comes to pass or if this is kind of just please let me out kind of thing, but I guess I'll have to play through it if nothing happens. As a Patriots fan, I would love it because we desperately need a receiver, and Pat, I guess we can just move.
You got one on the way.
I was gonna say we can move right to that because the other guy that has been long rumored to potentially sign with the Patriots has still not and may not, and it's Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley seems like he is down to the Jaguars and the Patriots, and the wrinkle in this situation is that the Jaguars essentially have to wait until Wednesday to sign Calvin Ridley because if they don't wait, they will owe the Falcons a second-round pick instead of just a third-round pick.
Wild condition,
compensatory picks, whatever. So
Wild.
To me, Pat, the fact that we're sitting here on Tuesday night and Calvin Ridley has not signed with either team it tells me that he's probably going to the Jags because the Jags are like, hey, we're going to sign you. We just got to wait. If he wanted to go to the Patriots, that move could have been made already. And, Jags wipe their hands clean of the situation.
Exactly. And I think Calvin probably just wants to go to New England so he can bet the under on a lot of their games there. But I guess it's another good segue that it's something we talked about last week that we reeled about this. My door is immediately shut on Gabe Davis.
Good.
Like as soon
Thank
as I saw
God.
that was the first thing I thought was, even with no Calvin Ridley, I'm like, oh fuck, like
Yeah.
that's a terrible spot. He's just gonna go be Calvin Ridley. But now if Calvin Ridley's there, like that offense, they still showed that Christian Kirk was the most consistent guy in that offense that runs the ball a fuck ton. They throw to Evan Engram a ton. Like, even without Ridley, I don't like Davis. I liked Davis if he went to, like Carolina or New England,
anywhere that he could maybe be the guy. Yeah.
Or close to the guy, maybe
Close
the
to
number 2 guy. And yeah, so my door slammed on it. My door will be slammed on Calvin Ridley if he goes back there as well. Christian Kirk, I still like Christian Kirk, especially in PPR formats.
Yeah, I agree. Gabe Davis, I'll say this. I do think Gabe Davis may have an improvement in terms of like statistical output in Jacksonville just because I think he's better suited for that outside role than Calvin Ridley was. Like, I feel like he may more consistently be used and take advantage of some of those deep shots that Trevor Lawrence likes to throw because Calvin Ridley's just not really suited for a lot of what they were having him do. Gabe Davis is. He's not going to have the target volume to make him relevant, and I still fucking hate him. I'm not touching him in fantasy, but I think Gabe Davis may have, one of his better years just in terms of actual football production. And I think it's a very good fit for the Jags, real life wise, of getting a guy that can actually play on the outside and open things up for Evan Engram and Christian Kirk over the middle and on the inside. And then the last wide receiver move that we have on this list, Pat, Darnell Mooney signs with the Falcons. We talked about that a little bit before. I don't think he's going to emerge as a fantasy weapon himself just because
there's real life football thing.
There's too many guys in Atlanta, so it is what it is. But he's, keep your eye on him, I guess. His name may pop up relevant if there's an injury or just maybe throughout the year he puts together a little hot streak. And then the tight ends. Few of them. Lots of mid. Nobody that's really super exciting here. Hunter Henry staying with the Patriots. I stand by. That's probably the most relevant one here because
I agree.
Whoever we draft at quarterback needs to throw to somebody, and he is still our primary red zone threat. On top of the fact On top of the fact that we lost Mike Gesicki to the Bengals, which another really nice real-life football fit, but we've been trying to make Bengals tight ends happen for years, and they just
Tanner
don't
Hudson
happen.
had a couple of good games last year, but since Tyler Eifert, they have not thrown to the tight. Like, we tried to make Irv Smith happen, Tanner Hudson happen. I forget who it was before Irv Smith, but it was somebody where it was like, this is a great fit. Like Jermaine Gresham, God, that was before Tyler Eifert.
That was well before, yeah.
Geez, random tight ends draft name, ass.
No.
But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, like Mike Gesicki now just loves playing in places where they don't throw to the tight end. Miami, New England,
Really?
and in Cincinnati. Well, New England, they just don't throw to anybody successfully. So,
oh, okay. Well, rude. I will say my eyes are certainly open if they do trade T. Higgins and don't replace him with anybody notable because
Tyler
you're
Boyd as
looking
well.
You're looking at a much different situation there, and Gesicki could get some actual targets. But for now, he's just going to be smothered by both Chase and Higgins. And if they bring back Boyd, Boyd's not signed yet.
Boyd has not been signed yet.
Signed.
No.
Okay, making sure.
Not much talk about him.
Yeah. Then we've got Jonu Smith to the Dolphins.
Play the sad.
Sure, I whatever. He's also not going to do anything behind Tyreek
Durham
Hill
Smythe's season
and Jalen
has
Waddle.
been destroyed.
Durham Smythe and Smith now in the same place. If Smythe is still under contract, I do like
I
that.
think he is.
And then we've got Gerald Everett to the Bears just to play alongside Cole Kmet.
Not as good as Cole Kmet.
If this does anything, it hurts Cole Kmet, which kind of sucks. But I think Cole Kmet has kind of proven enough to maybe stand on his own here, at least if they're going to have a high-volume passing offense under Caleb Williams.
And one more name,
probably will.
Just to mention, which was kind of weird, Colby Parkinson.
He got a lot of money.
To the Rams. Yeah.
He got a lot of money.
And I understand, like, a lot of what he does, he does some blocking too, but, like, we've seen a lot from Tyler Higbee in the past handful of years, especially with Matthew Stafford. Like, I don't think it's out of the realm of the possibility that Colby Parkinson is a guy that is on the streaming radar. That's where I honestly,
I was super interested in that deal because I looked at it compared to other tight end deals active in the NFL, and it put him right in line with CJ Uzama and Hayden Hurst contract-wise, which, yes, those guys are pretty irrelevant, but those guys, when they signed, were like kind of expected to be producers. And Colby Parkinson is not a guy that had any hype behind his name. And so the fact that he is signing a contract that's in line with two guys who we, at least at one point, expected some offensive production from is kind of interesting. So we'll see if Colby Parkinson and his magnificent hair, I think he still has it long, can maybe find his way onto the fantasy radar here as well. Pat, I hate to do this to our big boys in the trenches, but we're going to skip over the fantasy relevant line signings for now and just run down the biggest defensive ones as we approach 90 minutes for the pod. Thank you guys for hanging with us as always. The Chiefs re-signed Chris Jones to a record-setting contract, so par for the course for them. Fucking Super Bowl's still on for them. I hate the Chiefs so much. They refuse to lose any actual impact.
And Mahomes restructured his contract, save him like 20 mil.
They're going to go sign Curtis Samuel. He's going to go for 1,500 yards, and we're all going to be in hell. The Giants trade for Brian Burns. This was a massive fuck-up on the Panthers' perspective because apparently they had an offer on the table midway through the year or maybe before last year
from the Rams,
that involved multiple first-round picks from the Rams. They now get not even a first-round pick for Brian Burns.
The Giants gave what they got for Leonard Williams.
Leonard Williams,
that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on there. The Steelers signed Patrick Queen. We mentioned that. The Raiders, Pat, your Raiders bring in Christian Wilkins.
Oh, my God. That is
a frightening defensive line.
God, I climaxed when that happened, man. That was... They were so bad at the defensive tackle. Now you cannot double-team Max Crosby because then Christian Wilkins is just going to run right up the gut and get, fantastic.
And Christian Wilkins is also just hilarious if you've ever seen his mic.
Yes, God,
I want to see him mic'd up with Max Crosby and see how that sounds. The Texans retooling their defense, making a bunch of moves. They signed Danielle Hunter and Danico Autry, both double-digit sack guys, so that will both replace Jonathan Greenard and probably improve upon the production that he had. Defense was certainly the biggest focus for the Texans this offseason because their offense cooked quite a bit. The Lions trade for Carlton Davis and sign Amik Robertson. I do not know how to say that name. Amik Robertson. Thank you. Two cornerbacks to help this secondary. Then, speaking of secondary, we've got the Bears signing Jalen Johnson to a $76 million deal, a rare example of the franchise tag actually turning into an extension. Michael Pittman did it too, so it does happen. Kenny Moore re-signs with the Colts. He's now the highest paid nickel in NFL history. And Jordan Poyer, after being one of the many Bills casualties that they cut, is going to the Dolphins. The Bills... Big down bad. Even restructured Josh Allen's contract, converted some of his contract to a signing bonus to open up some cap space, and they still had to cut basically all their impact defensive players. At least they got Deion Dawkins back, so that's good. Folks, a couple notes right before we sign off. NCAA tournament is coming up. Stay tuned for a potential announcement on a off-the-bench mob March Madness challenge. Maybe we'll have some prizes. Maybe it'll just be for bragging rights. Either way, we want to compete against you guys.
Get to pick an article of clothing that I don't wear on the podcast.
Yeah, at least as UConn guys, we gotta host a March Madness tournament because that back-to-back's coming, baby. And then Pat, I'm sorry that your CCSU Blue Devils did not qualify. Number one seed in the.
I was there. Tournament. That's why they lost. I wasn't there in the quarters when they won. So I went. I bought a ticket 10 minutes before the game. I was out in Plainville, next town over from where they play, and I bought the ticket 10 minutes there, and it was very, very, very sad. And that game probably just ended right now. They're at that conference championship, and I'm very sad.
A tough scene for sure. Well, we at least have UConn in it, and Quinnipiac might make it, so we could have a couple of Connecticut
Yale
teams.
as well.
Yale too. Yeah, let's get that Connecticut representation in there. All right, guys. Look, if you
Wagner won. What the 54 to 47?
Ew.
What the hell?
Ew.
I wanted Merrimack to win because Wagner beat Central. I'm going. Okay.
Guys, if you were sticking around hoping for some viewer questions, we are obviously out of time, but I promise anyone that sent them in, I will bank them for next week because I'm sure they're still relevant. And that is our free agent breakdown, guys. We will be back here next week, same day, same time, probably with a little bit less chaotic of an agenda.
Yeah, no kidding.
But thank you guys for tuning in. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney. We'll see you guys next week.